Hello. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Jesse Nava. I am the president of TEDxBentleyU. So this year's event was brought to you by TEDxBentleyU and all of the volunteers here today. They're going to be wearing this sweater. So this is because of all of their hard work, all their dedication. We've been working on this for quite a few number of months now since the fall semester. I'd definitely say the initial meetings happened in around September, October. So it's great that we're finally here. I do have quick few announcements before we do start. So just in terms of like the TEDx etiquette, we would prefer if everyone could make sure that all of their phones are on silent, so nothing goes off during the presentation. So for this reason, this is because we're recording and we're going to be doing a live stream on this session, so we want to make sure that it's not interrupted by any phones. In the same manner, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be having, we're going to ask for all of you to stay in your seats as long as possible in terms before breaks, because we do have special breaks in between. We have a coffee break, and then we also have the end session, a networking session. But what we don't want is people moving around and distracting our speakers, because that might also interrupt the recording and the live stream. And then also you may come out on the live stream like covering a camera. So we want to make sure that everyone stays in their seats for the specified breaks that are going to happen like every basically hour and a half. So it's not too long. We hope that you can wait for that. And then in the meantime, so if we're all set, we're going to go ahead and start up.
From Kenya to Colombia, from Iraq. From Kenya to Colombia, from Iraq to Korea, in slums, in schools, in prisons, and in theaters, every day people gather at TEDx events around the world to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. Today, you are part of a global conversation about our shared future. So what is this TEDx? TEDx is an initiative of the TED Conference, a non-profit devoted to ideas worth spreading. We grant free licenses to allow TED-like events to spread globally. This event today is based on the TED Conference format and I make sure to thank the team ideals, but is independently organized by your local community. So please make sure to thank the team of volunteers who worked so hard on today's event. It's their ideas, dedication, and time that made it all possible. It's they who booked all the speakers, and the views you'll hear today are, of course, those of those speakers, not necessarily of TEDs. But we hope their talks spark an exciting conversation among you. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for openness and for critical thinking, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you'll take out. And now, on with the show.
Good afternoon and welcome to TEDxBentleyU. So my name is Rick Okus. I'm the Dean of Arts and Sciences here at Bentley, and it's really my pleasure to welcome all of you here and to help launch the fourth TEDx event here at Bentley. I'd like to acknowledge where this all began. So the first TEDx event here at Bentley began really through the initiative and leadership of a student named Kevin Ma, excuse me, who graduated in 2015 as well. So he came to Bentley with the idea of launching and hosting a TEDx event, organized the student teams, and actually had to really break some new ground here, convincing some people in the community of the value and the importance of putting together an event like this. And it's really thrived since his initial launch 5 years ago. This year's event, and you met Jesse Nava here, is organized by the largest team ever of both graduates and undergraduates working together to invite the speakers, to do all the organizing, the recruiting, the auditioning of the speakers, the fundraising. So please take a minute to look at the back of your program and acknowledge the many people involved in putting this event together this year. And I think given all the work that they've done in the past, really 6, 7, 8 months, they deserve a big round of applause for bringing us here today. So I want to note that this year's event was sponsored by the Valente Center for Arts and Sciences, the Office of the Deans of Business and Arts and Sciences, the Center for Women in Business, the Center for Business Ethics here at Bentley, and numerous other individual donors and sponsors that I believe are also listed in the program, and we really want to acknowledge and thank them for their support. So I'd like to highlight that TEDxBentleyU is really well aligned with Bentley's mission. That mission is to educate creative, ethical, and socially responsible organizational leaders by creating and disseminating knowledge, impactful knowledge within and across business and the arts and sciences. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today and enjoy the TED Talks.
I've been walking around with this on me for the last hour. It finally fell off. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alyssa Hammond, and I will be your host for today's TEDxBentleyU program. Very excited. As you can see by my very big face and my title, I'm the Director of Undergraduate Career Education and Outcomes, also known as Undergraduate Career Services here at Bentley, and it is my absolute pleasure to be here with you today. We have some amazing speakers from a number of different fields ranging from sustainability, human capital, marketing, and finance. And we hope by the time we end the day together, you are all feeling what our theme is today, which is limitless. So let's get started. Our first speaker is Bethany Elwell Spada. Bethany is an undergraduate here at Bentley, and throughout Bethany's 4 years at Bentley, she's been dedicated to her academics, her work, and her personal activities. Bentley's LSM program has enabled her to focus her education on her interest in business and her passion for the environment. So please help me welcome to the stage, Bethany Elwell Spada.
4 years ago, I came to Bentley to start my college career. Ooh, sorry. This was move-in day with my beautiful mother. Since move-in day, I have joined a competitive dance team. I spent a semester studying abroad in Australia. And as a senior, I can thankfully say that I survived all of Bentley's GB courses. Over that time period, a lot changed. Myself, my friends, my career search that's still ongoing. And over that same time period, there's one thing that has not changed. And that's been the continuous generation of trash and wasteful behavior all around me. Coming to college and living with other people initially made me realize how much waste got produced outside of my household. I saw that people were not thinking about their waste in the capacity that I was. And rarely do they know how to properly recycle. You can ask any of my roommates about that one. But sorry, I'm totally forgetting my line. I'll make a joke about it because that's what I said I was going to do. This was a very different kind of environment from what I was used to, a different mindset. I grew up in a very waste-conscious household. And I was raised that way partially out of frugality because we couldn't afford to be wasteful, but also out of concern for the environment. We recycled, we composted. Those were, to me, what I thought normal. And we also donated everything that we could to shelters, to charities, to make sure that that stuff didn't end up in the trash. My mom was creative. She was resourceful. To make sure that our waste didn't end up as waste. But the problem is that not everyone thinks like this. In 2013, Americans generated 4.4 pounds of garbage per person per day. To visualize what that looks like, 4.4 pounds is about the size of a small pumpkin. Now, over the course of a year, add all of those pumpkins up, and your trash generation becomes the size of a small cow. And with the entire population of the United States generating that 4.4 pounds, it's enough waste to fill 63,000 garbage trucks every day. Thinking about our trash generation in this capacity blows my mind. It's absolutely crazy. It's almost unbelievable. I'm not going to stand up here today and tell you that the answer to this problem is to stop using stuff and to stop buying stuff. Because although that would be the easy answer, it's not realistic. Our society, our economy functions off of buying and selling. We thrive off of it. We want things when we want them, how we want them. When we do get them, we want something else or we want more of it. And that's fine. I get that. We're consumers. Quite frankly, my soon-to-be marketing degree wouldn't be relevant without that consumption. But this pattern ultimately means there's no end. There's no limit. Our waste is limitless. Sometimes with issues this big, this vast, it can feel like there's no foolproof solution, especially environmentally related issues. There's no solution that then doesn't lead to another problem. Our current answer to this issue of waste is to recycle this and reduce that, and drink from this water bottle because it's reusable. Oh, plastic straws, forget those. But I hate to break it to you guys, but these solutions aren't working. We need to think about the problem differently. The way we look at our waste needs to change. What if, instead of looking at our waste, our garbage, our trash as a physical problem, we consider it an opportunity? An opportunity that could be equally as limitless as the problem itself. Whoa. We look at the very things causing the problem as the opportunity to solve the problem. This perspective may be difficult to grasp at first because we don't often think about what goes into our garbage. It's the items we use and then throw away. But our garbage consists of food, of paper, packaging, the not so everyday items that you throw away like clothing, furniture, yard clippings. And with each of these items, there's a different impact, and they need to be addressed separately, meaning that there's no one-size-fits-all solution to our problem. Trying to see the opportunity in our waste is also going to be difficult because we don't actually see our garbage. We are removed from the problem. Right now, our waste is pretty easy to get rid of, but what if it wasn't? Imagine a world where your waste, your garbage, built up and accumulated in your backyard. I guarantee you we'd be acting a little differently than we are today. But the reason that we're able to think and the reason that we're able to act like this is because of our modern waste management system. The good thing about our modern waste management system is we don't have to live with our waste. But the bad thing about our modern waste management system is that we don't have to live with our waste. Therefore, it's out of sight and out of mind. We don't fully comprehend, we don't fully understand what happens to it after it just goes away. I can tell you that some of that waste will break down for a long period of time, but some of it won't. And so that means that if it doesn't just go away, it has to end up somewhere. And that somewhere is in landfills, incinerators, oceans, our animals. You can see how the complexity of our waste makes it very difficult to solve the problem. But thinking in a way that we see the opportunity within that waste is a good place to start. So what opportunity am I talking about? How could there be opportunity in our waste? Garbage is gross. Well, with the materials that we're wasting, there's the opportunity to be creative and to be resourceful. The opportunity that we're currently not taking advantage of. In the film Wasted, the story of food waste, Anthony Bourdain was a celebrity chef. He visited a farm and he discovered how much produce, how much vegetation never got used or sold off the farm. And this was either because it was underripe or because it was a part of the plant that we didn't use. So what does that mean? Let's look at the cauliflower plant, for example. Of the whole plant, only 40% of that plant is the actual vegetable, the cauliflower that we eat. The other 60% are those leaves that we don't eat, we don't consume, we don't use them, they end up as waste. We are putting time, energy, and resources into growing something and then throwing more than half of it away. How does that make sense? I get that cauliflower isn't exactly everyone's favorite vegetable. You might be sitting in the audience thinking, yeah, no, I don't like cauliflower. I don't really care if you throw it all away. But this is just one hidden part of the system, one example of how we're not utilizing our resources and our materials in their entirety. This is a wasted opportunity. And that's because we are failing to see and to use the full potentials in those exact things that we are wasting. So, what Anthony Bourdain did was he took that waste and he turned it into delicious meals that he could sell at his restaurant. He transformed that waste into a resource, into ingredients. He saw the opportunity to be innovative and to create something that had never been done before. He could have just made new recipes out of the actual cauliflower, like we would expect, but he didn't. He looked at that 60%. He capitalized on the opportunity to do more with that waste, to cook it, to sell it, make money off of it. Hey, we're business students, we get that. This is the way that we need to be thinking in order to optimize our resources and therefore reduce our waste. I know we're not all farmers or celebrity chefs. We're not going to leave here today and go save the other 60% of that plant. Especially those of you that don't even like cauliflower. But there are things that you do use and that you do like potentially in your everyday life that go underutilized. The need for innovation doesn't only apply to food. It applies to all those categories of waste, whether it's paper, whether it's your clothing. I don't know exactly what makes up your waste. Therefore, I don't have the exact solution for how you can prevent that waste. But you do, if you look for the opportunity. We need to be seeing the opportunities and acting sustainably the way that Anthony Bourdain did. How can we use our materials without wasting them? And if we do waste them, can that waste become something else? Could everything we use be reusable? Could we redesign our processes and systems so that they ultimately don't lead to waste? These are the kinds of questions I want you to be thinking about. Certain businesses embrace sustainable practices because it literally is good for their business. It forces them to save money, use their materials more efficiently, and then ultimately, they look good in the eye of the consumer because they're potentially doing something that their competition is not. What if we had to be less wasteful in order to achieve our goals, our everyday lives, operate our businesses. NASA, for example, they had a recycling system designed that turned astronauts' urine into drinking water. If you ask me, that's the ultimate recycling system. Maintains self-sufficiency. And they did this for 2 reasons. One, they physically did not have the capacity to send gallons and gallons of water into space. And 2, the more stuff you send up there, the more it costs. So for them, recycling their waste, figuring out how to turn it into something productive, that benefited them. When the business reasons make sense. Rather, the opportunity makes sense. People start innovating, and people start adopting these sustainable practices that are better for them, the environment, and their community. With society growing more and more concerned with the environment and acting sustainably, being able to see the opportunity in our problems, seeing the opportunity in our waste, is crucial for us to actually make progress towards living in a less wasteful world. We all have things we are passionate about. Whether they're related to the environment or not, there will be a form of waste. Think about how you can use that waste and turn it into something productive, something that could benefit you or benefit someone else. Your t-shirts, those could be turned into a blanket. You could freeze your food before it spoils so that it doesn't go into the garbage. Your yard clippings could turn into compost. It could be as simple as just making sure you know how to properly recycle the right items. These small changes, these actions, that will change the world. I hope today that I have convinced you to start looking at your waste differently. Apply your creativity. Find ways that you can innovate. Find the ways that you can make your waste not waste. Pursuing the opportunity will be the key to solving our waste problem. Those opportunities, they could be limitless if we don't waste them. Thank you.
Okay. Our next speaker is Carlos Gutierrez Pantoja. Yeah. Clearly a very personal favorite. Carlos is a recent graduate at Bentley, or of Bentley, excuse me, and what he loves most about branding and advertising is the process of educating and exposing people to ideas and movements they might not know enough about or previously hadn't heard of. Since leaving Bentley, he has worked and is working as an assistant media planner at Mullen-Lowe Media Hub. He's responsible for planning media campaigns across digital channels for the Department of Defense. He and his team provide analysis and information on sites and technology to support their clients' media recommendations. Please help me welcome to the stage Carlos Gutierrez Pantoja.
I love branding and advertising. From a young age, I remember being fascinated by the images I would find while flipping through a magazine or the commercials I would see while playing on TV. As a kid, flashing visuals and exciting new products can really make you feel like you want something, even though you might not need it. Now that I'm an adult and currently working in this industry, I've come to realize that it really isn't the commercial aspect to branding and advertising that I like, but rather it's the process of educating and exposing people to ideas and movements they might not know enough about or previously hadn't heard of. To me, the power of advertising does not rely on giant billboards or Super Bowl commercials. That's just part of it. It relies on having the power to get into people's minds and change their perception about something. We commonly define these types of initiatives as awareness campaigns. And if done effectively, these campaigns can really have an influence over the way we look at things that are happening in the world. When I began college back in 2014, from day one, I knew that I wanted to work in advertising. I just had to figure out how to open that door first. As my mom reminded me every now and then, when you choose a job you love, you will never have to work a day in your life. I feel like there's a book out there that all parents read, and that is where they get this quote from. Nonetheless, it's excellent advice. I knew career-wise what I loved, and I wanted to make a living out of it. During my undergraduate summers, I had the chance to complete advertising internships internationally. For the first one, I flew back to my home country, Honduras. For the second one, I flew across the pond and worked in London. Whether I was client-facing or back of the house, working for digital or print, collaborating with an international business or a local one. With each of these experiences, my love and passion for advertising grew. And I knew that I wanted to pursue this full-time after graduation. When it was time to begin my job search process, a stressful moment in every young adult's life, I began to question everything I had done professionally for the last 4 years. This would be my first time pursuing a full-time job in the United States as an international student. When I was in Honduras, I was able to infuse the work that I did with my Latino roots. When I was in London, I was one of many employees with an international background. But in the US, things just felt different. I would go to career fairs, and I was fortunate if out of 100 companies, 2 of them hired international students for jobs in advertising. I would reach out to recruiters, network, build relationships to eventually hear from them that they could only extend job offers to a limited number of non-US residents. They had already met that quota. I thought that my love for advertising was limitless, but in that moment, numbers became my biggest enemy. I also knew, however, that I wanted to stay here for as long as I could. In order to do that, I had to get a job. Not only that, but I had to get a job within a certain number of days before my student visa expired. I had invested extremely formative years of my life in America. I was just beginning to get a taste of what I thought the American dream was, and I did not want to let go of it. Bentley students, what is the one thing we start working on the second we get here? Other than trying to figure out how to get along with our freshman year roommates, we learn how to build strong resumes. I wanted my resume to be on steroids, highlighting all of my experiences on campus, my involvement, my professional experiences, my GPA. But then it didn't really matter how much time I spent making sure that these areas looked good. I couldn't hide the fact that I was still an immigrant until I tried to. During in-person or phone interviews, I began to over-enunciate every single word I was saying in order to make sure I was hiding even the tiniest hint of an accent. Small disclaimer, back in Honduras, I did grow up watching 20 seasons of Dancing with the Stars and 22 seasons of America's Next Top Model. So when it came down to American slang, I was an expert. Didn't really matter, though, how much I understood, interacted with, and adopted American culture. I was still an aspiring immigrant. I would write cover letters describing where I am today and where I'd like to see myself in the future, but I would never mention where I came from. When the biggest fault in your resume is something you can't control, your self-worth begins to struggle. I did remember, though, that I come from a family of strong, independent immigrants. My sources of inspiration were just a phone call away. I stopped thinking of myself as a non-US resident seeking a job to stay in America and started branding myself as a global advertiser who already had professional experiences working for 2 international markets, Honduras and London, by age 22. My elevator pitch worked. I landed the job of my dreams and started working with an amazing media team at the #1 advertising agency in the United States. Amongst many other things, this meant that I could stay here working for another year. But what happens when that year ends in July? Another period of uncertainty, as I would have to apply for an H-1B visa extension that is based on a lottery process. With this, I felt like I was constantly worrying about the next part of my life without realizing that I was right in the middle of what I used to look forward to. About 2 months ago, I had a conversation with my employers, and they let me know that we wouldn't be able to apply for my H-1B visa extension, which is what I needed to stay. I'll be leaving my job in July of this year, not because of my performance, not because I didn't love what I was doing, but because of my immigration status. As I broke the news to my friends and coworkers, a common response that I got was, "Carlos, that's not fair." This idea of fairness is something I had been struggling with because while my situation did not seem fair to them, there was far more unfairness happening in the country. I felt like now more than ever, in a country that was founded by immigrants, being an immigrant was no longer a good thing. For so long, I felt like I had to hide or silence such an important part of my identity within a system that did not guarantee anything in return. And going back to this idea of fairness, looking at it on a national level, what I kept seeing through my eyes, especially this past year, was the dehumanization of my Honduran brothers and sisters. On the news, my hometown, San Pedro Sula, has been labeled as the murder capital of the world. Gang violence, extortion, sexual and gender discrimination are things that I experienced and saw for the first 18 years of my life. And as someone who's been very much affected by this, I completely understand where a need to leave comes from. That is why I wasn't surprised by the number of people that joined the immigrant caravan this past year. But for someone who hasn't grown up in an area affected by high levels of corruption, violence, and poverty, this can be hard to understand. Only a small percentage of Hondurans have the means to make their way into the US and afford an education that could extend into a work visa. We have citizens of Central America putting their lives at risk on the road to further be persecuted upon reaching the border of the United States. To me, it's no longer a conversation about letting people in. It's a conversation about human rights. And as I prepared for this talk and thought about this, I ultimately wanted to look at it through the lens of a non-US resident who is working in advertising. The power that advertising has relies on changing people's perception about something. In order to do so, there is a set process that we follow. One of the first things that we are taught as marketers is a simple diagram called the consumer's journey. This diagram is divided into 5 steps that must be followed in chronological order. You can only advance from one step to the other after the previous step has been completed. The last 4 of these steps are interest, desire, action, and post-action. But before we can get to any of these steps, we must begin with step number 1, awareness. And that is why I'm here today. We can't be interested in something or take action if we are not aware as to what is happening and why it's happening. People who joined the caravan in October of last year, starting in Honduras, were tired of fearing for their lives and hopeless about ever being able to provide a stable future for their families. Mothers did not come here to be separated from their children upon reaching the border. A transgender Honduran woman did not come here to be murdered in a U.S. detention center. My people didn't come here to take your jobs. We came here to support our families, for our safety, and to be who we are without the fear of persecution. As we become more aware of the reasons as to why someone might leave their home country and how they're being treated upon reaching another country's border, we can take smarter action and show that we care for those who are being treated in the worst ways possible upon asking for asylum in the United States. And I do believe in the power of immigration because my heroes are immigrants. In 1979, at the center of the Nicaraguan Revolution, my mom was unsure about her future in a country that had declared a violent war between political parties. At age 15, she decided to move to the nearest neighboring country, Honduras, leaving her mom, sisters, and everyone she knew behind. Once the war was over, the border between Honduras and Nicaragua was closed. She could no longer go back. Being separated from your family, really at any age, will affect you for a number of years. But my mom knew that in the long run, it would be worth it. In Honduras is where my mom finished her education, developed herself as an outstanding professional, raised my brother, and raised me. And I do think she knows it was worth it. My older brother, a Bentley alumni like myself, was able to get his H-1B visa after graduating. He is now 5 years into a career in global banking technology and living in Brooklyn. I'm so thankful that out of all people, I was able to have my brother close to me as he made America feel like home when I first moved here. The 3 of us get to be together as a family around 2 to 3 times a year during special occasions. And today is one of those special occasions. My mom and my brother are here. We understand that the reasons why we moved are so that we can get to a point where we can support one another and safely be together again. I no longer hide, professionally or personally, my immigrant identity, as I understand the power that immigration has. By applying the basic principles of advertising, we can understand that without awareness, we cannot get to a point in which we can open our doors and opportunities to people from other countries. Let the stories of immigrants be heard as told by immigrants themselves. By sharing immigrant stories like my own, we are able to understand why for some of us, home is not the place we are born in, but rather it's the place where we can provide and take care of not only ourselves, but also the ones we love. Thank you.
our next speaker is Ravina Agavne. Ravina states, quote, "When the limit is less, I choose to go limitless." She works in digital marketing, focusing on the scheduling and tracking of different channels of digital markets. She has a degree in electronics and telecommunication engineering from Vishwakarma, did I say that correctly? Vishwakarma, there it is, Institute of Technology, and is currently working on her master's here at Bentley in marketing analytics. Please help me welcome to the stage, Ravina Agavne.
So what do you want to become when you grow up? What do you want to become when you grow up? How many of you were asked this question as a kid or while you were growing up? Almost all of us. But how many of you are still pursuing what you thought you were going to do, or you stuck to a plan? Some of us do, and some of us don't. And some of us don't even have a plan, which is okay. But one thing that's common among all of us are hurdles or limits. We all have them at different points and at different levels. Now here's my story, some experiences and lessons that I learned through them, and some detours I chose to take in life. Being born in a typical Indian family full of engineers, where my father, my brother, my cousins, my uncles, everyone is an engineer, I was asked to put on my horse blinkers at a very young age. And these got ripped off midway in engineering, where I realized that this was not my cup of tea, and it was not where I belong. But I was not a quitter. I decided to finish what I had taken on my plate. Also, I wasn't sure where exactly I did belong. I was 19 and I was lost. The two things that kept me going through engineering was, number one, dancing. It was and will always be a space where I find my peace. I was heading the college dance team, attending workshops to improve myself, participating and even winning a lot of competitions. And number two, a few business management courses I could take up as electives during my engineering. These courses gave me a direction in life, and I knew that this is what I wanted to pursue in the future. Now going back to my childhood days, due to the nature of my father's job, we kept moving from city to city every couple of years or sometimes every other year. And this made it very difficult for me to get some professional dance training I always wanted. Not every city or every town that we moved to had those facilities back then in India, though my parents tried to do the best they could for me. Fast forward towards the end of engineering, my dance instructor asked me to go for dance auditions for one of the best dance institutes in India. Now this came as a surprise to me. I was definitely passionate about dancing, but I never thought I was good enough. We humans do a great job at doubting our own potentials and setting limits for ourselves. And that's exactly what I was doing at that point. I realized this and I went for the auditions. And I was super nervous to see thousands of dancers from all over the country. The auditions went on for 2 days with multiple rigorous rounds where we were tested in different styles. And finally, I made it to those top 70 dancers from the country who had this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get trained under one of the best choreographers in India, Mr. Shamak Davar, in his intensive 1-year dance program. Now this is a very prestigious program in India. You get to train in different styles like ballet, jazz, contemporary, Bollywood, and even some special subjects like science of dance, dance movement therapy, and many more. I decided to go for this. And Indian parents are very liberal that way. They say, hey kid, you can do whatever you want as long as it's engineering or medicine. Indian kids are allowed to take a break in their studies only when they're preparing for their higher studies. And here was I, the outlier, the black sheep of the family who decided to go on a break after 4 years of engineering. Now, this was definitely a tough decision for me. I had a degree in my hand and I had no idea what to do with it. It was just a blank piece of paper for me. My friends, my contemporaries were getting amazing jobs, moving abroad for higher education, and some of them even starting their own business. And I was inviting a lot of fury, raised eyebrows. My relationship wasn't working out because I was exploring too much and I did not stick to the plan. But I did not relent into these limits, and I decided to go deeper into my passion for dancing. I worked hard to get into India's top dance institute. I was training day in and day out and performing, traveling with some of the best artists in the country. In life, when you cross a few hurdles and just when you're about to relax and enjoy it, life surprises with a few more of them. And that's exactly what happened to me. Though I was in the best dance institute, I was getting rejected every single day, not for my lack of training, but for my brown skin and my short height. And that's when I realized that life is not always going to be fair. And it's okay, it is just how it is. The final result is never going to be in your control, but the amount of efforts that you put in is. On day 1 of our training, I was put in group 4, where we had only 4 groups, with first being the strongest. Down but not out, I successfully completed the training, which instilled in me the qualities of discipline, perseverance, and balance. And on last day, I still remember my late ballet teacher mentioning that I had developed one of the strongest foot point in the class, and I had made my way to group 1. And that is something that every dancer wants to hear. So as I mentioned before that I wanted to pursue business studies, I applied for summer schools, and I was fortunate enough to get selected at the IE Business School in Spain, which is one of the best business schools in the world. Now, this was a life-changing experience for me. Sharing the classroom space with 27 different nationalities was an eye-opener for me. Different cultures, backgrounds, professions opened gates to millions of thoughts of me, and I realized that there are limitless things to learn in this world. Also, my brown skin, which was a barrier to me earlier, was exotic, rich, and beautiful to a lot of people here. After summer school was completed, I went back to India, and I took up 2 internships to apply what I had learned over the summers. And then I decided to pursue my master's to get a deeper knowledge of the field I now love. I had found my second calling in IE, marketing. And here I am today, in a completely new country, graduating with one of the best marketing analytics program in the US. In my first few classes at Bentley, I realized that most of my classmates had some concrete experience and exposure in marketing that they brought back to class. And this brought back the same demon questioned me again if my decision to take the break was the right thing to do. I was insecure again. But eventually, I decided that rather than being insecure by them, I am going to get inspired and learn from their experiences. And that's when it finally dawned upon me that barriers or limits are definitely imposed by the society, but it's mainly the game of your mind. Little perseverance mixed with discipline and rationale works as a perfect blend. So it's been 2 years that I moved to this country at Bentley, and I'm in my second internship, this time at Puma, which is a dream company to thousands of them. I'm learning the clockwork of retail management and marketing as I envision to have an apparel brand of my own exclusively for dancers. I now have a dream, a goal, where I can blend all my passions and learnings, dance, retail, and business. So now I always tell myself, this too shall pass. if there is a hard time in your life, or you feel that you are lost, it is going to pass, provided you work on finding the right path. And it's okay to take a detour rather than moving in the wrong direction. It's okay to pause, to accelerate, but look for a place where you belong. No two people in this world, not even identical twins, have the same thumbprints, which means that we are all biologically different. So it's time that we all start being physically different and mentally accept it and be happy about the fact that we are all unique and we can set our own journeys. Just because that one student from your school has $1 million business today does not mean that you need to have it too. You can have your own definition of success and your own timelines and work towards it. Don't let the society or your family, your friends, or your boss confine you by their timelines and their definition of success. So these are some detours that I took in life, and here I am today, learning different lessons. And I am very blessed to have these different experiences which not everyone has. Dancing brings out the creativity and confidence in me. Engineering has made me a critical thinker. Because I could move so often in my childhood days, I am an adaptable person today. Spain taught me to be more comfortable in my skin. I have learned to embrace each experience and make the best out of it. And now when the limit is less, I decide to go limitless. And finally, I have a question for everyone. Do you think you have reached the destination where you feel you belong? Thank you.
Our next speaker is a graduate of Bentley by the name of Deepak Chugani. Deepak is the founder and CEO of Savacargo, which was funded by Y Combinator, an American seed accelerator with about a 1% acceptance rate. He's raised over $3.5 million in equity between startups and real estate ventures. He also has experience on Wall Street and has led over $3 billion in projects related to M&A, IPO, and debt deals as an investment banker at Bank of America. Please help me welcome to the stage Deepak Chugani.
Next month, it'll be 5 years since I graduated from Bentley, and coming back here this weekend makes me incredibly nostalgic. I'm not only nostalgic of how amazing college life was here, I'm actually much more nostalgic when I think back to the person I was when I was sitting in your shoes as a Bentley student, and I constantly notice how much I've changed since then, in spirit and in mentality. If I had to summarize my 5 working years out of Bentley in one phrase, it would be this: when there's a will, there's a way. I think that quote speaks to me and our generation because pursuing seemingly impossible or unattainable goals is both exhilarating and a real challenge. It pushes us out of our comfort zone to try to overcome adversity and achieve something difficult that you can be proud of. I've also learned in painful depth that for every crazy and ambitious goal that you have, there's going to be a personal price you have to pay. That price might be physical, emotional, social, mental, or similar, but you have to pay it. I have 3 life stories I want to share with you today from my past 5 years out of Bentley and the lessons they've taught me that I wish I knew when I was sitting in your shoes in this auditorium. 3 stories, that's all. My first story is about my time in investment banking at one of the world's top 5 banks. Investment banking is considered the holy grail for entry-level jobs in finance. Everyone, and I'm sure at Bentley, will have heard that it's the shiny industry where everyone wants to break in because it opens up tons of doors, it's very high paying, and it's prestigious. The problem is, it's very hard to break in. It's very hard to break into investment banking because they only want to recruit from the same 10 to 15 schools, unfortunately excluding Bentley. They have a few hundred spots every year for tens of thousands of applicants. And it's very hard because the top banks want to recruit from their own pool of summer interns. And the competition for those internships can start as early as your freshman year when you don't even know what classes you want to choose. When I was a junior at Bentley, I knew nothing about this industry and I had just started learning about it. I kept hearing how shiny it was, how amazing it was. But I had none of the requirements that they look for. And to make things worse, I was an international student, which puts you at further disadvantage, as we've heard today, due to visa paperwork that employers just don't want to deal with. But somehow I had gotten obsessed that investment banking was the right move for me, so I created a plan and started reaching out to people like crazy. I reached out to hundreds of alumni from Bentley and other schools just to ask them questions. How did you get your job? How do I mold my resume? How do you get noticed? And how do I sell myself? This process was the least glamorous thing you can imagine, and many of you probably can relate. For every 100 messages I sent, I'd only get a handful of replies, some of which were rude or just not helpful. But alas, some of those replies did help. They led to introductions, and those introductions led to interviews. And slowly I started seeing results. In the end, like most of my stories today, I got a little bit lucky. My parents are Indian, but I grew up in Ecuador, so I'm a native Spanish speaker. And the Latin America Mergers and Acquisitions team at Bank of America Merrill Lynch needed someone like me. I still remember the final round interviews for that group, where 8 Ivy League candidates with prior banking internships and me. Luckily, I was selected. I'm very proud of that experience because I really obsessed over it and it was the first time I achieved something of that nature. The price that I paid to get the investment banking job was simply to hustle and be persistent. But the price I paid once I was on the job was unexpectedly brutal. I'm sure many of us have read the stories about how investment bankers work 100-hour weeks and they're living in the office, etc. I don't think the stories do any justice until you actually have to live through some of this. Until your boss comes at 10 p.m. at night and gives you work where you know that means you're not going to sleep tonight when that's all you've been dreaming about for the past 3 weeks, sleeping 3-4 hours a night. Investment banking was a really hard experience and it took a toll on me. But once I lived through it after 18 months, I came up with the courage to quit the job. I realized it wasn't the right place for me. My big lesson from this story I want to leave you with is that you have to learn to separate appearances from reality. Investment banking was this shiny thing that seemed amazing from the outside, but I got swayed by it and I didn't realize if it was really the right place for me. As you pursue professional opportunities, experiences, I wish for you the wisdom to separate appearances from reality so you can find the places that are the best for you and allow you to be your best selves. My second story is about my time making a 180-degree shift from investment banking and finance into the world of technology and entrepreneurship. When I was sitting in your shoes between 2010 and 2014, companies like Snapchat, Uber, Instagram were bursting seemingly out of nowhere, reaching multi-billion-dollar valuations overnight. And some of those were founded by young men and women in their 20s. How hard could it really be? I remember my naive self thinking. So I took my banking savings and I took an 8-month sabbatical where the goal was to try new things and ultimately come up with the startup idea. I still remember the fall of 2016 is when I officially ended the sabbatical and came up with my big idea. I knew I was going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. 6 months later, I painfully realized this idea would not get me to Zuckerberg levels and that this was going to be really hard. I had to let that idea go and shift courses radically to a new one. That leads me to the lobby. The lobby was a simple startup idea. What if you could buy a 30-minute coaching call with someone who worked inside the company that you were dying to work for but had no connections in? I felt it was a powerful idea. I was incredibly passionate about it. I felt it was simple and it was connected to a personal problem I had had for myself and dozens of my friends. After the initial glamour of coming up with the idea faded, I started telling my friends, working on the idea, and interacting with people I respected. In all honesty, this period was quite depressing. If any of you have tried to do something new or risky, you will know you will get pushback from everyone around you, or at least most. I still remember nights where I would come home and not be able to sleep because of an innocent comment or joke a friend made about my startup idea, or that I was spending my time and savings on stupid things that would never work. Little did they know that my identity was so wrapped up in that idea that all these comments and jokes were lethal to my peace of mind. The closest thing I had to a mentor or a North Star in the startup world was the fact that I would spend ridiculous amounts of my time consuming content from one organization called Y Combinator. For those of you who don't know, Y Combinator is largely considered the world's best and most selective startup accelerator. They've been around only over a decade and have launched over $120 billion worth of startups and products that many of you use today, such as Airbnb, Dropbox, Coinbase, Quora, and many more. They have tens of thousands of applicants every year and only fund a few hundred companies. The acceptance rate is rumored to be around 1% and is rumored to be 5 times harder than getting into Stanford or Harvard. Needless to say, getting in was a dream for me. But this time I was at an even worse disadvantage. Having read all of Y Combinator's content, I knew they had a strong bias against solo founders like me, and an even stronger bias against startups where none of the founders are programmers. So that 1% acceptance rate was even lower for a company like mine. But this time my obsession was 10 times stronger than when I wanted to be a banker. So I created a plan and did the same thing. I started reaching out to anyone who would speak with me. I think I spoke after hundreds of outreach with 30 YC alumni. I consumed all their content, and I knew they were looking for businesses that had launched, that were growing, and that had a huge market opportunity. I did everything I could, and in the end, over a dozen of those alumni ended up recommending us internally. And I was able to get in as a solo, non-technical founder. I think it's the only time in my life I can truly say one of my dreams came true. I still remember crying for 30 minutes outside of the San Francisco Caltrain station when I got the call that they wanted to fund me. This moment was pure and sheer joy. My biggest lesson from this story is that daunting and crazy goals seem impossible when you look at them from day one. But if you just get started and count on the fact that little wins every week and every month, they will compound over time and get you closer to the goal. As you guys chase your dreams, just get started, go bit by bit, and persist, because the little wins eventually add up to the big ones. At the end of Y Combinator, we raised $1.2 million from some of the world's best investors. We were covered on TechCrunch, Bloomberg, tons of other publications. And I was being invited to panels and conferences, and my inbox was flooded with people asking for advice on how to build the next big startup. We had made it. Or had we? After we closed our seed round in the lobby about 1 year ago, we did what most startups do. We made a list of ideas and initiatives that we would have to undergo to grow the business to achieve its full potential. We started burning cash. We grew our team size to over 10 people, and we just started going. After 6 months of trying every possible thing I could think of, we realized it wasn't working. No matter how many experiments we did, how many initiatives we tried, the numbers that mattered for the business just would not go up. And I knew it was time to make some very tough decisions. I had to let go of all of those 10 team members, including someone who moved from New York just to join our itty-bitty startup a few months ago. And then I had to start telling my investors. Imagine having to tell people that you admire, who gave you money for your dream, to build your dream only 6 months earlier, and say, hey, this isn't going to work out. And by the way, I might take your money to do something totally unrelated for what you funded me for. This led to another one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. I was not legally obliged to offer my investors money back, but I realized we have to think long term, and I made the hard decision to offer them that option. This entire process was one of the darkest periods of my life. After spending all my savings, after spending a lot of time killing myself to reach this point, I felt I had let everyone down and that we were starting all over again. This was the lowest point, right? The only place we could go was up. So eventually, things started taking an interesting twist. My investors humbled me, and about 60% of them stayed, with a handful of them tripling their investment just a few short months later. Fast forward again, only a few short months, we're now building something in the international logistics space, which is incredibly close to home for me because it's something my father worked on for 30 years, and it's creating jobs in the US and Latin America, the two regions that have molded my entire life. Our team is again 10 people in a much faster time span. Our revenues this month will be 5 times higher than the best month we ever had at the lobby. And all of those numbers are set to double or triple in the coming months. I have never been more excited since I graduated from Bentley. My biggest lesson from this story is that if you're going to try big and audacious goals, you have to combine that with an intense sense of reality when things aren't working. Pivoting our business entirely and offering money back were two of the most anxiety-inducing and painful decisions I've ever had to make, but are now the things I'm most proud of when I look back on my experience. I wish for all of you, when you try new and bold things, the courage to shift course radically when you deep down know you're not going down the wrong path, because that will happen. My 3 stories from today are the reason I've become much more ambitious than I was when I was a student here at Bentley. Every time I set a crazy or goal that seemed relatively impossible, some delusional part in my brain kept telling me there was a way. It kept telling me when there's a will, there's a way. Every time I spent a lot of time identifying the right goals for myself, and when I found them, I ran towards them, and I did everything I could, accumulating those little wins until they became a reality. When I realized things weren't going down the right path, I was willing to make bold and radical changes, whether that meant restarting my career and quitting banking, or restarting our entire business. I wish for all of you the ability to find the goals that make you feel that they're the right place for you, right goals, the right experiences, to separate appearances from reality. I wish for you the courage to try bold and new things and persist, accumulating those little wins which will eventually turn into big ones. And I hope you have the sense to change course radically and have courage when things aren't working or are not right for you. And if things get unbearable or you feel hopeless or lost, please know that I've been there. Everyone I admire has been there, and you can power through. When there's a will, there's a way. Thank you.
Amazing. Such passion has been on the stage for the last hour. Amazing stories, amazing insights, inspiration. Can we give our first round of speakers another round of applause? So we're going to take a short coffee break. I'm sure everyone could use a little stretch and a little caffeine. So there's refreshments in the back. We're going to break for about 15 to 20 minutes. We're going to ask everyone to take their seats at that time. If you need any assistance, there are TEDxBentleyU volunteers stationed all around the auditorium. So enjoy the break, and we'll see you in a little bit.
So we had a number of you show up to the second session, so we're going to just do another recap of what we kind of are hoping for from the audience. So in terms of etiquette during the TEDx talks, we're hoping that everyone can just double check to make sure that their phone is on silent so that no phone is going off during the session. As a reminder, this is being recorded and is being streamed live to the campus and any individual who uses the live stream. So we want to make sure that everyone has their phone off. In addition, we also want to make sure that people are being aware that we're going to try and reduce as much movement during the actual talk as possible. We only have another 4 speakers left, and if you were here for the first session, you know how fast that flew by. So if we can, we're please asking if you could just please stay in your seats as long as possible. That would minimize any movement for the live stream, and also it's not going to distract our speakers, which is the most important thing. So with that being said, here's Alyssa Hammond, your host. Thank you.
You want to bring the lights down?
Oh, yeah.
Not that I don't love to see all your faces. In fact, I prefer it, but I think for taping they need it. Yeah, ooh, very dark in the house. Welcome back. Welcome back to our second half of TEDxBentleyU. Our program has been amazing so far, and it will continue to amaze and delight you all. So our next speaker is Isha Joshi. And Isha is an undergrad sophomore here at Bentley. And to say that she's heavily involved here is a gross understatement. She is, stick with me on this, she is the Public Relations Director for the South Asian Student Association. She's a brother with Delta Sigma Pi. Clearly representing today. She's an orientation leader, a program manager for service learning, an SGA senator, and a member of the Women's Leadership Program. Yeah, this girl does not, listen, she doesn't waste any time. She's got a lot going on. That's right. And in her free time, which doesn't seem like she probably has much of, but in her free time, she's very passionate about music and dance. And she's also extremely passionate about getting to know new people and cultures, and of course, quote, anything and everything sparkly. So, if you would help me welcome to the stage the very sparkly Isha Joshi.
Dying to know, what's your sparkle? Is it your ambition and determination focused towards success? Or perhaps it's your ability to empathize and connect with people you might have just met. Or maybe it's your creative mindset, which allows you to be unique and express yourself in ways that no one else can. Okay, let me explain a little bit. So one of my favorite quotes is, leave a little sparkle wherever you go. In this context, your sparkle is your impact. It's the impact that you have on all those you interact with. It's the impact that you have and you want to leave on the world around you. Perhaps it's your everlasting, limitless legacy. You know when someone says, wow, that just made my day, or thank you for making me smile. Those are all acknowledgments of your sparkle coming into play and shining for all to see. Well, now that you know what a sparkle is, I bet you're wondering what my sparkle is. My sparkle is spreading positivity to all those around me and trying to be a little bit of sunshine in their day. I like to live by the idea that while not every day is good, there is definitely something good in every day. And I strive to energize others with this vitality and spirit of optimism and excitement in all that I do. I would also say that my other sparkle is fostering this positive environment for others, but by being unapologetically myself. Because I want to create a welcoming and inclusive atmosphere for my friends, family, peers, and acquaintances. I want everyone I interact with to feel as if they belong, as if they can be themselves. They're weird, crazy, authentic, amazing, true selves, and open themselves up and share as much as they please. Having this knowledge of how my own actions can make a small difference to even my community solidifies this as a goal of mine. It's something I wish to work towards and achieve every single day. It keeps me motivated, it keeps me driven to be positive and to be the best version of myself, the sparkliest version of myself. And I'm so much more aware of who I am, who I want to be, and how to ensure that those around me understand this about me because I know my sparkle. Realizing how I want my thoughts, words, and actions to be reflected into the world around me, into our greater universe, has truly changed my perspective on how I live my day-to-day life. But it wasn't always this prominent or easy to discover what my sparkle was. Let me backtrack a little bit. So, of course, as I mentioned before, what's the first thing I think of when I think of my sparkle? Positivity. So that comes along with my parents. My parents are the biggest positive influences in my life today. No matter how many hardships or struggles they've had to face in their life, they've done it with the biggest smiles on their faces. My dad specifically has reinforced this spirit of optimism when he began sending me motivational messages written from the heart each day, and especially when I was experiencing a rough time in my life. He would tell me, "Isha, have a spiritual day." Now, what do I mean by a spiritual day? Fill your clear mind with happiness and energy and face every situation with a smile, and you will see the wonders which radiate from that. This seemingly small gesture truly shaped my perspective on life. It made me feel supported and loved and provided me with the motivation and drive to keep going. The way that my dad impacted me through his words made me want to impact others in this same way, because if a few short sentences could make such a difference to me and bring motivation, color, and brightness back into my life, well, then I wanted to help others see the beautiful world in this beautiful way as well. This inspired me to do something similar as a means of achieving my goals and spreading my sparkle. Thus, my sparkly text came to life and became a core part of my daily routine and shaping the impact I have on my friends and family around me. This was my way of spreading positivity to my community and leaving behind a ripple effect of small acts of kindness as well. Have you ever experienced a rough time in your life? I'm sure you have. Do you know anyone else who is experiencing a rough time in their life? How would you feel knowing that there was someone out there for you, supporting you no matter what, even if they don't know exactly what you're going through? That was a mission that I wanted to accomplish. Knowing what my sparkle was allowed me to be there for people when they needed it the most, just like my family was there for me. I came to the realization that I can only grow with a positive and supportive environment around me, because when you have an environment like this that helps you grow, the scope of your progress and growth is that much greater. And that is why I want to build this kind of environment for others. A sparkle is often a goal, a dream, a desire that glimmers from within you. And once you discover your impact and figure out how it drives you, the possibilities of what you can do with this information are truly limitless. Realizing the potential of your sparkle may be difficult at first, but you can find it actively throughout your life, so why not start now? Now you may be wondering, well, Isha, how does one discover their sparkle? I like to ask people this question when they're least expecting it, so they can't overthink, can't overprepare. Come on, tell me, don't think. What's your sparkle? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? What's your sparkle? It is that much more authentic and meaningful that way. As busy college students or even working professionals, it's not often that we have a chance to slow down, to pause, to reflect upon our passions, our impact, our goals, and how we affect others. Answering this question allows us to, for one moment, just be in the moment and understand who we are with zero distractions. Once you're able to reflect upon yourself in this light, the possibilities of what you can do are, again, limitless. While we often believe that we know ourselves the best, much of us is still unknown. And this one small moment of self-discovery can stimulate further ongoing reflection and understanding, because knowing your sparkle leads to progression, and it leads you to understand yourself and those around you in the world on a much deeper level. Knowing this will make your perception of yourself and who you are and your potential truly unbounded. Knowing who you are allows you to be comfortable with that reality and be willing to be open and vulnerable to share this part of yourself with the world. It's in these sharing moments where I've developed priceless connections with friends both old and new. When I first started asking people this question, being so willing to learn about the deepest and most sacred stories of my peers opened up the possibility for relationships I would have otherwise never expected. A skill that I can now leverage into the workplace, the classroom, and any other relationship I hope to build. The significance behind knowing and understanding your impact on the world around you stretches far beyond answering this simple question. Because while I may not know exactly what I want to do with my life just yet, what I do know is how I want to live my life. A life full of purpose and meaning. A life that will leave an everlasting mark on the world. Do you all know how great you are? Each and every single one of you. If you do not choose to understand and accept the greatness of who you are and who you can become, no one else will either. The possibilities of what can be achieved if one has this knowledge and understanding of who they are and what they wish to become, then everything is truly limitless. You can use this self-awareness to develop a mindset focused on optimism and growth, and use that to propel you into your future successes. Because knowing your why ignites your what, and it keeps you focused, gratified, and passionate into a more meaningful life. You can even leverage your own knowledge of your own sparkle to foster a positive environment for others and help them discover their sparkle. Because helping others find their sparkle can even be your own sparkle, as it is for me. Look to the person to the right of you. Now look to the person to the left of you. What do you think their sparkle is? Do you think you can figure it out? If someone struggles with answering this question when I bombard them with it, I try to flicker the light switch a little bit and hope that soon their light bulb moment will go off too after I tell them what I think their sparkle is. And soon their sparkle will radiate from within them just like it does for me. I like to play my marginal role in making the world and my community a better place for all of us by helping others access their true potential and helping them understand who they truly are, and using this to help them develop their personal brand. Someone once asked me, Isha, if time were to freeze and you could live in one moment forever, what would it be? Well, if I could live in one moment forever, it would be the moment when I asked someone, what's your sparkle? And they turn to me, and they're thinking, and their forehead scrunches up, and they're like, what do I feel comfortable sharing with her? I don't know what this means. Why is she doing this to me? But soon and slowly, a smile grows on their face as they realize that they're about to share what they truly love about themselves. It's in those 3 seconds that they have to explore who they are. I know the possibilities of how their passion and potential align are truly limitless. I want to be stuck in that moment forever. Because it's in that very moment that as I mentioned before, I have forged some of the strongest connections that I have to this day. When these connections and their sparkles work together, anything is possible. While our similarities unite us, our differences will only make us stronger. You, yes, all of you, have more power within you than you know. You have the power to make a difference. You have the power to make an impact. You have the power to leave your mark on the world. If we all work together to understand each other better, to build better relationships, and be more respectful of everyone's ideas, the change we can make collectively is infinite. Who knew that one simple question could change my life and how I live it forever? Well, I invite you all on this journey. I invite you to join me on this journey to understanding yourself, to finding yourself, and working together to make the world a more sparkly place for all of us. So the next time you're with your best friends, or even a complete stranger, just ask them, what's your sparkle? Thank you, everyone.
Well, it's a good thing she was wearing a yellow dress because I think we had a bit of sunshine on the stage just now. Next up, we have Elisa Vincent, who is an old friend of mine. Elisa is currently a global director of talent management and organizational design at a large biotechnology firm in Boston. Throughout her career, Elisa has been a leader and advocate for women's advancement in professional and social contexts. Having founded women's leadership programs, in many organizations she has worked for, which have included Bentley University's very own Center for Women in Business and Bright Horizons Family Solutions. She's a frequent blogger and public speaker on topics such as personal branding, leadership resilience, and human capital optimization. She currently serves on the board of Media Girls and is an adjunct faculty member here at Bentley for the Human Resources concentration. She's a proud mother and wife, and she considers her 2 children her greatest accomplishments. Please help me welcome to the stage Elisa Vincent.
Hello, so I'm here to talk to you today about leading a limitless life with limits. But I want to start by asking you a favor. Could you do me a favor? Could you repeat the title of this talk 3 times fast for me, if you can? Ready, set, go. I'm losing some of you. What's happening? So it's a tongue twister, right? It's pretty hard to do. When Bentley asked me to come here today and talk on the topic of limitless, I paused. Because the topic of how we, as people, can lead lives of limitless aspiration, limitless ambition, and limitless curiosity without burning ourselves out in the process is one that I, and many like me who've been working in the human capital management and development space for many years now, have been pondering for quite some time. So if we think that tongue twisters like that are difficult, leading a limitless life is actually pretty difficult to do. And we ask ourselves, is there a perfect formula? Is there one way to do it? I believe the answer is no. And what life has taught me in my long, long, long life is that only when you actively set limits can your life be limitless. It sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? But it's not. So what do we know? We are experiencing an extreme rise in stress in our world. And if we focus just the United States for one moment, in September of 2017, the American Psychological Association said that there was a 31% increase in students on college campuses who were seeking help for stress in counseling centers. 31% increase. When the increase in student enrollments was only 5%. And guess what? Stress doesn't just stay with you here on your college campuses. It travels with us. It travels with us in our households, in our workplaces, so that in January of this year, the American Institute of Stress, because yes, we have an American Institute of Stress, reported that 75% of American adults say that job stress is their #1 stress in their lives. That number is staggering. We take it with us to work, to our households, and to our college campuses. And I don't need to talk to you about statistics. All you have to do is look at your Facebook wall, right? Take note of the number of friends that you have and family members who are talking about how busy they are, how stressed out they are, how they have too much to do, and too little time to do it. And those people that don't post that on their Facebook wall, and they just post about their magical unicorn lives, are lying. So all of that cortisol that we used to have running through our veins and our primitive selves to run away from tigers are now running through our veins all the time. But what happens when we flip that model? And instead of allowing our stress to define us, we actively define our limits regaining control over our lives where and when we can. We, and I think especially of the young women in the room, have been told at some point in our lives, you can have it all, you can do it all, you can be it all. But I'm here to tell you today that there is no all. And if there is an all, you define it. And it's okay not to try to achieve that and reach that standard all the time. You can achieve great things by being selective. Now, when many of us are stressed out, some of us go to a glass of wine, dare I say, 2 perhaps. So my family is from Tuscany, and about 2 years ago, I had the privilege of getting a tour of a vineyard from a very prestigious winemaker in the Chianti region. And I learned something fascinating. What I learned from this winemaker was that our greatest wines come from some pretty stressed out grapes. So, when winemakers provide their vines with a lot of nutrients and plenty of water, the vines produce lots of grapes, but the grapes are of lower quality. What winemakers realized many, many years ago is that if you provide less nutrients and less water and force those grapes and those vines to work harder, the vines produce less grapes, but of much higher quality. So what did I take away from that? The right amount of stress can be beneficial, but total control and vigilance is absolutely necessary. And as humans, we are not that different. We are built to be limitless, but with balance, centeredness, and ownership of our boundaries and our limits. So how can we do this? I have 4 habits that I want to share with you today that I believe are essential to finding that balance. So habit number 1 is to be an ecosystem leader and lead with an ecosystem mindset. So leading in the 21st century for all of us, in an uber-connected world, when all eyes are on us, and we have plenty of those tongue twister moments, is really hard to do. But an ecosystem is built to sustain and thrive even under the harshest conditions. So what's an ecosystem? My really non-scientific answer is that an ecosystem is a biological unit of interacting organisms that are both dependent and independent. They grow and thrive individually in order for the full ecosystem to be able to do so. Ecosystem leaders are the same. They're self-leaders as well as leaders of others who acknowledge that their success comes from their own focus, drive, passion, and purpose, and is also dependent on the success of those who surround them. So there's an element of leading limitlessly that is patient, deliberate, agile, resilient, and extremely responsive. So when we have these elements in our lives, those people in our lives, those winemakers that batter us down, whether non-intentionally or intentionally, sometimes our strength is dependent on the collective strength of our network. So habit number 1, look to your ecosystem and don't go at it alone. There is strength, innovation, and growth in numbers. Habit number 2 is allow yourself time to daydream. When all of our surrounding environments batter us down, it's very difficult to maintain limitless and inclusive perspective where we crave learning and will remain open to all that's around us, to new experiences and to new ideas. Sean Anker, who had a great TED Talk in a book called The Happiness Advantage, said, if you believe in your ability to succeed, the more likely it is that you will. But what does it mean to really believe that you will succeed? So a friend of mine once told me that she never worried about driving into the city and finding a parking spot, because whenever she was driving, into the city. She would envision that a parking spot would appear, and one would appear for her just in the spot where she envisioned it. Now, whenever she would tell me this, it would mean I would silently think to myself, she's crazy. I would raise an eyebrow and I would move on. But one day I was driving into the city all by myself, and I thought, well, there's no one here to judge me. I'm going to envision a parking spot. And lo and behold, I found a parking spot right around the corner. Now, I am not here to tell you that if you envision your parking spots, they're going to miraculously appear for you all the time. But there was something to that, because the more I stayed positive about finding a parking spot, I can tell you that the number of times I actually found one did increase exponentially. So the first step in defining what limitless looks like to you is visualizing it. What does it look like for you today, in 3 years, in 5 years? And don't forget to stay positive. So Sean Aker also said that our bodies are 31% more productive at positive than at negative, neutral, or stressed. And that this mental practice of visualizing our futures helps us boost confidence, it enhances our moods, and it helps healing. And it has a positive effect on our performance. So habit number 2, define and envision your limitless. Today I give you permission to daydream and own it. That's one sure way that you're going to get there. And habit number 3 is pay it forward often. Ultimately, you have one life to live, and it's hard to remain bold and secure in the life that you envision for yourself when we live in a culture where we're constantly hearing and collecting feedback from others, whether it's at work, from our family members, from our friends, where it often feels like others are defining your limits more than you are. Others are defining your goals and your capacity more than you are. Now remember, as much as you need to lean into your ecosystem and know that you are not limitless in a vacuum, you alone can define what limitless looks like for you. And when it feels like you're losing that perspective, there's one sure way to get it back. And oddly enough, it comes with paying less attention to yourself. Helping others, even in the smallest ways, can mitigate your daily stressors. We often turn to others when we are stressed, when we're feeling burdened, but research tells us that when we proactively reach out to others to help others, it has an effect on our mood and on our capacity to stay positive and feel successful. Even if it means paying for coffee for the person behind you in the Starbucks line, or if you're from Boston, Dunkin' Donuts, or if it means smiling at someone when you can tell they're really having a bad day and when you're really having a bad day. What that helps you do is it helps you control putting positivity in someone else's life, and it helps you to absorb it a lot more. So habit number 3, paying it forward, adds meaning to your life, even in the smallest ways. It is especially useful to get you back on track when you feel like you're sliding off. And lastly, that takes me to habit number 4, which is mimic those finest wines. Push yourself to your limits, but know when to stop. To add balance to those toughest of tongue twister moments when you desperately feel like you need that glass of wine, to keep your head and your heart and your sanity healthy and in check, know your limits and say them out loud. It helps you to hear them and to own them. Allow and accept those precious moments when you need to catch your breath, draw a line, regroup, and acknowledge that we all have limits. For most of us, between work, family, friends, pets, extracurricular activities, that leaves only 1% left for us at the end of any given day, week, month, year. And that 1% is not enough. If you only allow 1% of time for you, that means that all of those other beings that need you aren't getting the right amount of you, and they're not getting the best of you. So increasing that 1%. And again, whenever you hear someone say, you can do it all, you can have it all, you can be all of these things, remember that you define your all. Time is going to keep going at a steady pace, and so too must your management of it. You don't want to stress that which makes you most capable of being limitless. But be careful, because when you think too long about your limitations, they run the risk of defining you more than you defining them. And sometimes we don't know what our limits are until we push ourselves to them. Ultimately, this is your journey. You already have the seeds planted in you. Follow these 4 habits when you can. There will always be people who you encounter along the way who will tell you that you are too much or too little of something. I am here to tell you today that you are everything that you need to be at this moment in time to accomplish what you want to accomplish. If you say yes to the right things and you say no to the right things. So be bold and courageous with your goals. Lead with centered drive and influence. And acknowledge that the greatest driver of your limitlessness is being realistic about your boundaries. When you set limits, when you do, your life can be limitless. Be selective and have fun. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Nikki Innocent. Nikki believes, quote, "As humans, we are all much more alike than we are different," end quote. She spends her days questioning the status quo. She coaches individuals on how to step into their strength and lead from a place of authenticity. In addition, she works with organizations to create inclusive environments. She leads deep and meaningful conversations via her podcast with a diverse set of individuals to amplify unheard stories. Please help me welcome to the stage, Nikki Innocent.
Thank you. Oh. Hey there. So, I'm going to give you 2 options. And I'm going to ask you to choose the one that fits you. Are you a happy person or a sad person? Are you an extrovert or an introvert? Are you masculine or are you feminine? I think you're going to like this next one, so I'm going to start the audience participation portion here. Hands up if you are a Boston sports fan. Yeah, all right. Okay. Hands down. Hands up if you are the rest of the world. So much pride there, my goodness. Okay, so let's keep going with this audience participation portion here. Early birds, hands up. Cool. Night owls. Yes, all right. Travelers. Okay. And now the homebodies. Yes. I think I know how this one's going to go being at Bentley, but leaders, hands in the air. Yeah, nice, cool. Followers, love it. And now for this last one. Hands up if you are perfect. Oh, okay. Now hands up if you're flawed. All right, I like that, okay. Now, if you're anything like me, you just wish up here there was some checkbox that said other. Because for me, In particular, these questions, they make me feel, ugh. These binary options are just not sufficient. They don't capture who I feel like I am. There's no room for me to be other. So here's my answer to that last one. Is it okay? Can I say that I'm perfectly flawed? Does that work? I use both the words, that's good, right? There is no category or box that defines me. One label just doesn't work. The words that you can use to describe me, they're limitless. But since most of you don't know who the heck I am, here are a few descriptors that I identify with right now. Oh, it's my little Bitmoji, say hey. So I am gonna ask you to take a journey with me back in time, like way back to the fall of 2015, so I can introduce you to someone. You ready? My friends, meet Corporate Nikki. She sits on the 41st floor of the tallest building in Boston, directly across the hall from the former governor of Massachusetts and President Obama's close friend. No big deal, right? Meet her at a networking event or in an interview, and she will seamlessly walk you through her purposefully groomed resume. In her office, she is surrounded by photos of the galas she attends and the sporting events she goes to, and that corporate swag in her office is endless. And if you could just take a minute and take a peek at those double screens, they're pretty cool, not gonna lie. So, I'm gonna ask you to come a little closer so you can take a peek behind the curtain and really meet Corporate Nikki. Okay, so that's not me. That's Laura Dern from the HBO show Enlightened. But this scene could have very easily been plucked from that 41st floor women's bathroom. No swag, no filters, no perfectly polished responses. Those tears, they were real. But the question that maybe you're asking, the question I was asking myself is, what the heck did I have to cry about? Well, day in and day out, I felt myself slipping away. I had this nagging feeling that I was going to lose myself. I was burnt out, and honestly, I had lost myself. So I knew I had to do something to give the real me some room to breathe. I took a leap. I bet on myself, and I started my own business. And in that process, there has been so much transformation that has taken place. So I've already had you go back once, but let's go back a little further to elementary school, where we learned about the process of a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, right? So initially, that caterpillar eats everything in sight, consumes everything possible to grow larger. Then there's this cocoon phase, that protective shell that allows for this magical transformation to happen. Then that metamorphosis takes place, and the butterfly is formed. The butterfly then breaks free of the cocoon and flies off. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna overlap a bit of my journey with that of the butterfly. My caterpillar years were growing up consuming everything in front of me. Literally, eating everything in my path and growing taller and stronger. Much like the caterpillar, when my cocoon began to wrap itself around me, I didn't even notice it, because just like in nature, it blended in with my environment. My cocoon was made up of things like building the best extracurriculars for your college application, or lining up internships, right, for the best resume post-college. And then I took these high-profile jobs and these new promotions and stretch assignments to perfectly groom my successful corporate career. That felt safe. I felt protected in all of these external achievements. I could say that I worked at XYZ company, that I was a homeowner, or that I was a college graduate. But then about 4 years ago, as my cocoon started making its way up to my head, I started to feel suffocated. Whew. This meticulously constructed life started blocking my view of my own future. I became fully encased in the layers of knowledge, of credentials, and those things, right? Those things that made me fit in. And I felt stuck. In talking to old classmates from Bentley and colleagues, to fellow entrepreneurs, and even my coaching clients, I have heard that this sense of stuckness is a very common experience. There's a familiarity to it. There's even this sense of safety to it. But also at the same time, you're in this state of inertia where you feel like you're fading into the backdrop of your own life. Now, many of you are probably business majors like I was. And one of the first things you do when assessing the viability of a new business idea is understanding how well it differentiates itself in the market. How well does it stand out? But for some reason, when we go about the business of living our own lives, we do everything possible not to stand out and not to look different from the rest. That desire to blend in, to go unnoticed, I mean, it's understandable. Right? Right now, we're in this culture that offers us probably one of two reactions when someone looks different or stands out, right? We've got the option of glorification or vilification. And even in glory, you're walking this extremely thin tightrope because one false move, and now you're this villain. But what if, maybe just for one moment, we left room in the in-between, room to be human, room to be flawed, room to learn, evolve, and grow. Now, this cocoon state for the caterpillar, outwardly, looks like this state of rest. Nothing's going on, right? But when you're in it, there is a ton of action taking place. There is significant unseen growth that happens extremely fast. In fact, when the wing is being developed in metamorphosis, the number of cells that make up that wing go from 50 to 50,000 cells seemingly overnight. For me, though you wouldn't call me shy, for the years and years, I was so hesitant and afraid to share my story, my voice, and my opinions on a large scale. Give me a business to market or a friend to rave about, I am all about it. But have me talk about myself? Nope, gonna clam up, like immediately. I have done a significant amount of work. But in the last month, truly, like the last 30 days, I have launched a podcast, and somehow I am standing here in front of you all today. Whew. In my ongoing journey of embracing my otherness, there's one pivotal component, and it's been truly understanding who I am, or me searching, if you will, and really understanding what my beliefs are at my core, and what I want my world to look like. For the caterpillar, it's gonna sound a little weird, but they actually digest themselves in the cocoon. They release these enzymes that break down their caterpillar tissues and make room for that butterfly to form. It's pretty gross, but it's also amazing too. And one of the coolest parts of this transformation actually maps so beautifully for the transformation to self-acceptance. In a 2008 Georgetown University study, scientists found that butterflies actually retain their memories from their caterpillar state. They actually remember. This happens with me when I start to feel that suffocation in my body. I know that that's a clue or a sign that somehow I have fallen back into that old routine. And what I need to do in that moment is I need to stop and I need to steer myself back on the right path. So finally, in this metamorphosis process, when the transformation is complete, the cocoon goes transparent. And outside, you can actually see the beautiful colors of that butterfly. The butterfly outgrows its encasement, breaks out, spreads its wings, and flies free. As a marketer, a women's leadership coach, and a diversity and inclusion facilitator, I have seen many times that this process is a difficult one. And my metamorphosis and breaking free stages are always the most difficult. It's really scary to let go of the world you know and step into something completely new and different. A lot of times, you don't necessarily have the right words. There is no how-to book for the next step forward. And many times, these changes, they can be hidden or cloaked in pain. Because when you are pulling back those layers, a lot of those protections are a result of pain you've experienced, or even that anticipated fear. Never really even happened, but you felt it in your body. But what I found is that when you shine a light on that magical transformation, so many incredible things happen. I learned that the negativity and that fear, they can't withstand the scrutiny of compassion. My fear was actually standing in a room full of people, was standing up to people and telling them about times where I felt like I didn't belong, because in many times in my life, I was the only person of color or woman in a room. I thought that if I told them that, I'd make them extremely uncomfortable. And if I made them uncomfortable, they would dislike me. And if they disliked me, they'd be out of here. And then I'd be living this lonely, cold, and empty life. I laugh because it just sounds so silly when you say it out loud. But for me, the truth has been the opposite. The more that I have stepped up and embraced my otherness, the more I've been able to get that weight off my shoulders and welcome people in that actually enjoy me and appreciate me for who I am. Now, this sense of release is wonderful, but there's also another piece of magic that comes with it. When you start embracing your otherness, you actually start to activate your superpower that has been growing within you through all of these experiences of feeling othered. That idea, it might be a bit meta, right? So I'm just going to give you a few concrete examples of people's superpowers that have actually come through in their moments of otherness. First up, we'll take a guest from my podcast, Checkbox Other. It's actually a podcast that centers around us sharing our stories of otherness. So, my guest shared that she had been bullied in middle school. She was picked on relentlessly and had no idea why. That experience led her to be a master middle school teacher for over 25 years. And then from there, she's actually creating safe and inclusive learning environments for people who are looking to embrace their legacy. Her superpower is that she is a true keeper of safe space for children navigating the ups and downs of middle school, for women stepping into their leadership potential, and for people navigating the end of their lives. And then there's my dad. As a teenager, he immigrated to this country without knowing the English language or knowing the place that was to be his new home. For over 35 years, my dad has dedicated his life to working with people who don't always have the ability to speak for themselves, children and adults with disabilities. Growing up, I got to join my dad at work. I saw how he created opportunities for those who didn't have the ability to use language, and many times not even their bodies, to be seen, to communicate, and to experience joy and connection. And then there's me. My most familiar othering experience in life has been the most frequently asked question that I receive. What are you? Or where are you from? It comes in various languages from all walks of life, without hesitation, from complete and utter strangers. And let me tell you, it is jarring. The angsty, teenaged me, yep, hands on the hips here, she would respond with, "I'm human. What about you? So I have learned to channel that emotion, that feeling of not belonging, into actually creating spaces where you belong, no matter who or what you are. You matter there. Now, I challenge all of you. What are the moments in your life where you have felt different or other? After this, take a moment, actually jot them down. I bet when you do, there are going to be those voices or those narratives that will pop up that have kept you nicely locked in that cocoon of your life. It's okay. Breathe through it and actually welcome those voices in. Ask them, is what you're saying even true? Explore if on the other side of their argument, it can illuminate the superpower that you were brought here to bring to the world. Activate that superpower, because once that superpower is engaged, you can embrace your otherness and you can be authentically you, no matter what checkbox comes your way. And at the end of the day, know that it's more than okay to live in a world where we are all perfectly flawed. Thank you.
Okay, so we're down to our last speaker for the day, and it is our very own Jim Pouliopoulos, otherwise known as Pouli, very lovingly here at Bentley. Pouli is a near and dear friend to the TEDxBentleyU program for the last few years. Some may recognize him as the senior lecturer of marketing or as the director of Bentley's professional sales program. However, what he also does is he helps other people find what makes them happy in life and ways to pursue that happiness. Jim says that being happy and limitless, quote, happiness precedes success. You can take steps to understand what makes you happy and what sort of work you do well and enjoy most. You can create daily habits and systems to keep your happiness front and center in your life's pursuits. Your success should flow from your happiness, but only if you take care of your personal needs first and avoid being swayed by peer pressure, by family pressure, and by external expectations. Once you achieve true happiness, you realize your future is limitless. So for the last time, please help me welcome to the stage Jim Pouliopoulos.
Good afternoon, everyone. 40 years ago, almost exactly to the day today, 1979, I went to my first rock concert. The band was Styx, and the song that was on the radio a lot back then, their hit song, was called The Grand Illusion. And the last line of that song is an interesting quote. We made the grade, and still we wonder who the hell we are. And I always think of that quote when, especially seniors come into my office at Bentley. They've studied something for 4 years, and now they're starting to wonder who the hell they are. Like, what am I going to do after graduation? I've majored in this or I've majored in that, but I'm not quite sure that's the right fit. And some people on the outside might think, well, that's crazy, right? I mean, they've spent all this time getting there. How do they not know? And I can tell you it's not crazy because it happened to me 35 years ago. I graduated from college in 1984, and basically for almost 3 decades, I spent my time moving from job to job, really just kind of being extraordinarily ordinary. I never really felt like I had found my fit until I came to Bentley a few years ago as a full-time educator and realized that I had finally found a place where my inner skills and my strengths really translated into impact on the world. I've never worked harder in my life. I've never loved what I've done more. But honestly, I've never felt more limitless than what I do today. And I'm hoping to share part of my story to help you maybe feel more limitless and to get there a lot sooner than it took me. So back in 1983, this was what we used to do for selfies. We didn't have smartphones, so we just used to draw each other. And I came across this, I had hair then too, so it looks a little different. I was a junior at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, WPI, a great engineering school. How I ended up at WPI was all through school. I was great at math and science. In high school, I had high SAT scores in math. I was the son of immigrants, and so becoming an engineer was the thing that they said was the safe path to take. And I know we've heard that a few times today. What was kind of lost in all of that was I actually had higher SAT scores in verbal and reading. And as much as I liked math and science, I actually enjoyed art and English, especially creative writing, even more. But when I narrowed down my choices of college, it came down to going to WPI and becoming an electrical engineer, or going to Brown University and majoring in journalism. And the environment that I found myself in, my friends and my family and my guidance counselors all encouraged me to go to WPI because, and I know some of you have heard this before too, if you get a degree as an engineer, you'll always have a job. It's a safe path to take. Oh, by the way, if you want to write and you want to draw your little pictures, you can do it on the side. So there I was a junior, and I think back to WPI, the most memorable thing that I did as a student at WPI was teach physics. It was a project called the Interactive Qualifying Project, which is one of their core curriculum elements at WPI. And it kind of fell into my lap. I wasn't looking for this project, but it fell into my lap. Think of the IQP as sort of service learning for engineers. You're supposed to find a need at the intersection of science and society and fill it as an engineer. And so I had the opportunity to teach physics twice a week to 40 students at a private high school in Worcester. I loved that job. I loved that project. It gave me the opportunity to model my teaching after the great teachers I had all through elementary school, middle school, and high school. I became a storyteller of physics. I was able to come up with sort of crazy and wacky ideas to break down these complex concepts into easy to digest modules, if you will, for the students to internalize. I got a chance to go into class every day and perform and talk and do public speaking. When it was all over, I wrote a paper about my experiences. That paper was 100 pages long, written on a manual typewriter, by the way, and illustrated with my drawings. So up there, you've got some pictures of examples that I used in class: nearsighted birds running into buildings and falling to the ground, a mouse running across ice, being chased by a cat. Will he survive? Will he not? This was the kind of experience I had, and I loved every minute of that experience. About 5 years after that, I was out socially with a bunch of friends, and one of my former physics students came up to me, gave me a big hug, and said, "I loved physics because of you. And because of you, I went to WPI, and I became a mechanical engineer, and I work as an engineer now, and I love it." And I looked at her, and I said, "I didn't think you had any interest in physics," from what I recall, right? And she said, "No, I did, and science was always so boring, but you made it come alive." And that impact really hit me, obviously. I was flattered, I was humbled. It was one of those moments in my life where I thought, I'm going to take the world by storm. Unfortunately, those kind of moments were very few and far between in my corporate engineering, project management type career. You can contrast those experiences really with my first job out of college. I was in a rotational program at a large multinational company. I was in engineering. There were 30 of us that had come out of college all together from different schools around the country, and we rotated into different assignments every 6 months to find out what kind of engineering we wanted to sort of focus on in our career. During that time, we were also part of a cohort. We were all taking classes and working towards our master's degree at RPI, another great engineering school. Every week, we did our assignments. Every week, the assignments were graded. And every week, the director of the program at this company would post the grades that everyone received in ranked order from 1 through 30. And I'm proud to say, really proud to say, that my work made it possible for the rest of the cohort to be in the top 90% of the class. I never scored any higher than 28 out of 30. And at first, I really started to think, like, what is wrong with me? I was told I was smart. I was told I was special. I should be better at this. And the work was, frankly, boring. The town that we were in was kind of dreary. And I became very unhappy. I started asking myself, why am I so unhappy? Why am I so unsuccessful compared to my peers? And it really started to bother me. And only in hindsight have I realized sort of what happened or what went wrong. You know, the definition of happiness the ancient Greeks had a definition called eudaimonia. And when you look at their definition, it is the joy you feel while striving towards your potential. When I think back to teaching physics as a junior at WPI, I realize now that my potential was being revealed in that class. And my potential was being revealed outside the classroom at WPI every day. I was class president one year. I was interfraternity council president. I used to be the one who always volunteered to write the reports for my project teams and get up and do the presentations. Those were my skills. Those were my strengths. And my potential was being revealed all the time. But I was running away from my potential in all these sort of engineering jobs that I was taking and trying to find my place. And I was basing so much of my on my knowledge and my ability to do work that I wasn't really the best at, that it really started to bother me. And so if you define happiness as what you strive towards to reach your potential, you then have to ask yourself, so what, right? We all have to work. Why do we want to chase happiness? Why is that so important? Well, there's been studies done, one recently done by the Gallup organization, that says we lose $300 billion a year in lost productivity due to unhappy employees. Physicians are about 19% more accurate and quicker in their diagnosis when they're happy. We want happy doctors, right? Salespeople are 37% more effective when they are happy. There's a health element to this as well. People who are generally happier have lower blood pressure, lower heart rate, lower stress hormones in their bodies. There's a lot of good things. They live longer. So there's a lot of good things about happiness itself that we should pursue. And a lot of this research came out long after my career in corporate America, so I didn't have the benefit of knowing this. But as a recovering engineer, one of the things that I found very comforting was that there is a happiness equation, right? You thought on a Sunday afternoon you didn't have to do any math, here it comes, right? So the happiness equation, H is your everlasting happiness. This isn't your temporary happiness that you feel, you know, when you win 20 bucks on a scratch ticket or when you get flowers from your significant other. This is your everlasting sort of long-term happiness curve, if you will. The S is your set point. So basically, everyone's natural state of happiness is set by genetics. So if you're generally a happy person, you can thank your parents. If you're generally unhappy, you can blame your parents. It's all genetics. Your happiness level is about 50% due to your set point, right? So about 50%. The good news is the other elements allow you to control your happiness a bit more. C is for circumstances. This is the circumstances that surround you. If you live in a war-torn country struggling with civil war, you're generally going to be less happy than if you live in a stable democracy with a good economy. That kind of makes sense. Circumstances are also the people that surround you, the social group that you find yourself in. The thing about circumstances is, yes, you can change them, but usually they're very inconvenient and expensive to make a difference, right? It's hard to move out of a country, it's hard to move out of a city, it's hard to change a group of friends. You can do it, but it takes a little bit of effort. So circumstances, you know, they're about 10% of your overall happiness. So it's hard to do, but it gives you a little bit of a boost. This is where you really can make some difference. So this is your voluntary activities. These are the things that you choose to do, whether it be the kind of work you do, the kind of volunteer experience that you have on the weekends, the kind of recreational things you do, anything that you do that's voluntary, that you have a decision point about, is V, or voluntary activities, and that makes up the rest of the 40% of your general overall happiness level. So again, like a good engineer, I look back on my life and I charted my happiness. So if you start on the left, I won't go through it in great detail because that's what I would have done as an engineer, but I will just give you the big picture here. On the extreme left is when I taught physics at WPI. On the extreme right is my career here at Bentley. In between, you can see peaks and valleys. The green line is my set point. I'm generally a happy person anyway. I think genetically I was kind of lucky that way. I'm generally a little bit happier than the average. Years ago, when I first met my wife, there was a song called Don't Worry, Be Happy. She changed the lyrics to Don't Worry, Be Poorly, right? Aww. So if you look at this diagram, right? Where there were, between my teaching at physics at WPI and my career here at Bentley, there was just a couple of points where my happiness exceeded my natural point. And there were about 3 troughs, 3 sort of dips under my natural set point. When I looked back, I realized the times that I was below my natural average sort of happiness level were the times that I allowed circumstance and voluntary decisions on my part to pull me down and make me unhappy. Where I surfaced and came out and had those peaks, those 2 little peaks in the middle of my career there, were moments where, again, circumstance or voluntary activities got me out of the trough. That first one, for a couple of years, when I first went into sales, it was a great role for me. I love teaching. Sales is a lot like teaching, making relationships, explaining complex concepts to prospects. It was fantastic. That little trough that followed there, that's when I went into sales management. Guess what? You don't do those things as much in sales management. You argue with the CEO about the strategic direction of the company. You work with underperforming salespeople who don't want to be there. It's not as much fun, and it definitely didn't work on my strengths. So basically that little peak at the bottom of that small little trough in the middle was when I got fired. It gave me time to think about what I wanted to do next, and you see I came out of that, and I came up, and it was positive again. I took a job in a small team in a different large technology company, and for the first 3 years of that job, it was fantastic because my role was to go to conferences and speak to 2,000 people at a time about the products we have, to stand in front of an audience like this and just talk about our products and tell stories about how they could use it. And I went and I trained salespeople and business partners, and it was fantastic. And where the line drops below the line again is basically that company getting acquired by a much bigger company, and my role sort of being unilaterally changed. And as you can see, that last trough is the deepest one. I was at that company for 13 years, and really the last 10 years were the most unhappy for me career-wise, until that final lower point right before coming to Bentley when I was laid off with 10,000 other people, so I didn't take it personally. Now, when you look at happiness and you look at those troughs, you look at those, I call them tide pools. You know, little tadpoles get caught in tide pools. When the tide goes out, you get these little fish that are stuck in the ocean because they're in this sort of isolated body of water. The only time they can escape is when the tide comes back in. Those are external circumstances. You're waiting for something to change externally to make your happiness go up. Fish don't really have a lot of free will, right? So basically, you can also get out of that tide pool by working on your inner happiness, by doing things that raises your happiness so you hit that set point and go higher, and when you're happy, you're optimistic and you can see more options in the future. So there are 3 areas that I tell people you should focus on to hack the happiness equation. The first one is tribe. These are the people that you surround yourself in. I don't include family in this because family are great supporters, but they often define you as who you were when you were younger. The first one is friends. There's research that says if you have regular and frequent contact with at least 10 friends, you'll live longer and be happier. Your happiness level will rise. For 40 years, I've had a dozen of my fraternity brothers from WPI, and when I look back over the 40 years in terms of our close friendship, I don't think we've gone more than 2 or 3 months without getting together for something social. For the last 27 years, my wife and I have hosted something we call Greek Thanksgiving. On the Saturday before Thanksgiving, yes, we invented Friendsgiving. Thank you. And most people show up every year for it, and the nice thing about it is because it's scheduled and you know it's going to happen every year, if you miss it, you know there's another one around the corner. So for you, when you graduate college, you've got to pull out that calendar and make those connections happen and get them on the calendar. Make it frequent, make it regular, make it so that if you miss one, you know there's a next one that you can go into. And then there's affinity. Who are the people that share your philosophies? Who are the people that you like to hang out with? I have an interest in happiness, and I reached out to a happiness expert in England named Andy Cope over Twitter, of all things. And we've formed this friendship now that has lasted for a couple of years. He's interviewed me for his podcast. I'm going over to England to talk to him about the work he does in positive psychology, all because I reached out and took action to meet someone who had my interest. You have to do that in order to grow your own happiness. When it comes to talent, you've all had your personality assessments done, and you kind of toss them away and think, well, that was pretty accurate. Go back and reread those and see what are the things that they're telling you you're really good at. And on top of that, one thing that you can do is every day for 2 minutes, sit down and write in your journal, what is the most memorable thing I did today? After a few weeks, you're going to see a pattern, and that pattern is going to basically tell you the things that you should be focused on doing in your career and in your life. Hustle. I don't mean just working hard, I mean side hustle. One of the factors that allowed me to come to Bentley and teach full-time is that I taught as an adjunct part-time instructor at 4 different colleges before I had a chance to come to Bentley. At one point, my wife told me, the only time that you're happy is when you come home from teaching a class at a college. Your day job is making you miserable. Big wake-up call, right? But that also gave me resume fodder so that when I applied for a full-time gig here at Bentley, it helped me get in the door. So work on your side hustle if you have to. And then thrill. And by this, I don't mean temporary thrill. I mean the thrill of being grateful to someone. The little dopamine hit that you get when you're grateful for someone who's done something for you or for anything that you're grateful for. A lot of you have these snap streaks going on. I don't have Snapchat. I don't know what those are. But I know that you snap each other somehow every day for like 300, 400, 800 days. Well, here's something you can try. If you want to build your level of happiness naturally, then instead of just sending some nonsense message back and forth, pick one thing that you're grateful for, anything, and send that as your snap message and get one back from your friend. And do that for 365 days and your happiness level will rise. Thankfulness. You've got to be thankful to the people that have helped you. A few years ago, I heard that one of my favorite teachers, one of my role models, was very ill, was in the hospital, and the prognosis was not very good. So I connected with her son, and I took some time to go visit her. Her name was Marion Jorgensen. She was an amazing English teacher. I hadn't seen her in over 30 years. So I went to her hospital. She didn't know I was coming. I knocked on the door. I walked in, and I said, "Hey, do you remember me?" And she looked at me, and she said, "Well, yeah, you're Jimmy Pouliopoulos' father, right?" I said, "You're close. I am Jimmy Pouliopoulos. I just have my father's hairdo." We spent 2 hours reminiscing and talking about the 30 years that have passed between us. It was unbelievable. At the end of it, I took her hand, I looked her in the eye, and I thanked her for the impact that she'd had on my life as a teacher. To this day, when I talk about it, I get emotional, and I feel my happiness level rise. Pick up the phone, go visit someone that you need to thank, and you'll feel your happiness rise because of it. You can hack this happiness equation. You can use it in your favor. I tell people all the time, you should be sort of strategically selfish. You should worry about using your strengths and your skills. Because what the world needs is for you to bring your gift to the world. Don't define yourself by your degree or the expectations that everyone else has around you. Focus on your happiness. It'll raise your level of optimism. It'll open your eyes to opportunities. It'll allow you to pursue your potential in ways that you can't even imagine right now, and it'll give you a chance to bring your gift to the world, and hopefully you can get there in less than 30 years. Thank you.
Okay, we did it. What a phenomenal day. We would love to thank all of our fabulous speakers, our wonderful sponsors, our volunteers for TEDU, and each and every one of you who sat through all these wonderful talks this afternoon. Without all of you, none of this would be possible. So give yourselves a round of applause as well. We'd like to invite you now to a networking reception that's going to be taking place in the back of Wilder Pavilion. You'll have an opportunity to network with the speakers as well as network with one another. And we hope that you all leave today feeling inspired and limitless. Thanks so much. Have a great day.